The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was asleep in her small apartment on Mars Colony 7 when her communicator began to scream. It was not the normal beep of a regular message. It was the sharp, angry sound that meant something very bad had happened. She sat up in bed and grabbed the device. The screen showed a symbol she had only seen in old training videos. It was the seal of the Galactic Council, 12 stars arranged in a circle around a single eye, the eye that watched over all known space. Elena read the message 3 times. Her hands began to shake. Not from fear, from anger. By the authority of the Galactic Council, the message said, Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the Human Coalition is hereby summoned to appear before the High Court on Athon Prime. The charges are as follows. Unregulated expansion into protected space, violation of 17 territorial agreements, development and storage of prohibited weapons of mass extinction. Failure to appear will result in immediate military action against all human worlds. She put down the communicator and stared at the wall. Outside her window, the red dust of Mars drifted past in the thin wind. Somewhere out there, past the stars she could not see through the colony's dome, 12 alien species had decided that humanity had become a problem, and they intended to solve it. Elena was 47 years old. She had spent 20 years as a diplomat, traveling between human colonies and alien homeworlds. She had learned 6 alien languages. She had shaken hands with creatures that had no hands. She had eaten food that would kill a normal human, just to show respect to her hosts. She understood aliens better than most humans ever would. And that understanding told her something very important right now. The council was afraid. She made 3 calls before the sun rose. The first was to her assistant, telling him to prepare her ship. The second was to the president of the Human Coalition, informing him of the summons. The third was to a small office on Earth, buried deep under a mountain in Switzerland. That call lasted only 30 seconds. It's happening, she said. We know. The voice on the other end replied. Prometheus is ready if you need it. Elena ended the call and began to pack. The journey to Athon Prime took 11 days. Her ship was fast by human standards, but the ancient station orbited a star near the center of the galaxy, far from human space. She spent most of the trip reading. She read everything she could find about the Galactic Council, the 12 species who ruled known space. They had been in power for 50,000 years. Since before humans had learned to farm, they had watched humanity discover fire, invent the wheel, and build cities. They had watched humans kill each other in wars that burned across continents. And then, 300 years ago, humans had built their first starship. The council had been surprised. Humans were so young, so primitive, so violent. They should not have developed space travel for another 10,000 years. The council's scientists could not explain it. Their models did not account for a species that could go from horses to rockets in less than 2 centuries. At first, the council had been curious. They sent observers. They made contact. They welcomed humanity into the galactic community with open arms and warm words. But the warm words had grown cold over the centuries. Humanity spread too fast. They bred too quickly. Their technology advanced at rates that made the council's scientists nervous. In 300 years, humans had gone from a single planet to 17 star systems. Their population had grown from 8 billion to over 100 billion. The council watched, and the council grew afraid. Elena understood all of this. She understood that to the ancient species of the galaxy, humanity was like a fire that burned too bright. Beautiful, perhaps, but dangerous, unpredictable, something that needed to be controlled before it spread too far. Her ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Athon Prime. The station was old, older than humanity, older than most of the species on the council. It hung in space like a great metal flower, its petals stretching out for hundreds of kilometers. Ships from a dozen different species docked at its ports. Lights blinked in patterns that meant nothing to human eyes. Elena guided her ship toward the human docking area. It was small, much smaller than the sections reserved for the elder species. That was intentional. Everything the council did was intentional. Her ship touched down with a soft bump. She took a deep breath, checked her appearance in the mirror, and walked to the airlock. The door opened with a hiss. They were waiting for her. She had expected diplomats. Perhaps a junior official sent to escort her to comfortable quarters where she could rest before her hearing. That was how these things usually worked. Instead, She found soldiers. 20 of them stood in a half-circle around her ship. They were Velthari, the most powerful military species in the Council. 8 feet tall, covered in hard black shells. With 4 arms and eyes that glowed a soft orange, they carried weapons that could punch holes through starship armor. At their center stood a figure she recognized from her research. High Arbiter Jalketh, the greatest legal mind in the galaxy. A being who had prosecuted cases for 4,000 years and had never lost. His shell was darker than the others, marked with gold lines that showed his rank. His eyes burned brighter. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said. His voice was like stones grinding together. "You will come with us." Elena did not move. "I was told I would have time to prepare my defense. The standard waiting period is, there will be no waiting period." Jalketh stepped closer. He towered over her, his shadow blocking out the lights of the docking bay. "The Council has already reviewed the evidence. The trial is a formality. Your guilt has been established." Elena felt her heart beat faster, but she kept her face calm. "Then why am I here? To hear your sentence." The Arbiter's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "And to give humanity one final chance to beg for mercy." The soldiers moved forward. They did not touch her, but they made it clear that she had no choice. Elena walked between them, her boots clicking on the metal floor of the ancient station. As she walked, she thought about the call she had made, the 30-second conversation with the office under the mountain. She thought about Project Prometheus, about what it really was, about what it could do. The Council thought they were putting humanity on trial. They thought they held all the power. They thought they could threaten 100 billion people and face no consequences. They were wrong. Elena had spent 20 years learning about aliens. She knew how they thought. She knew what they feared. And she knew something that they did not. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they first made contact with the stars. They had smiled and nodded and signed treaties and followed rules. They had played the part of the young species, eager to learn, happy to obey. But it was all an act. And now, walking through the halls of the oldest station in the galaxy, surrounded by soldiers who thought they had already won, Elena Vasquez began to prepare for the moment when the act would end. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity really was, and Elena was going to enjoy watching their faces when they found out. The council chamber was designed to make visitors feel small. Elena understood this the moment she stepped through the massive doors. The ceiling rose so high that clouds of mist drifted near the top. The walls curved inward, covered with carvings that told stories older than human civilization. Light came from somewhere above, pale and cold, casting long shadows across the floor. At the center of the chamber was a circle of bare metal. This was where she was meant to stand. Around this circle, rising up like the seats of an ancient stadium, were 12 thrones. Each throne was different. Each was built to hold a different kind of creature. And on each throne sat a representative of the species that ruled the galaxy. Elena walked to the circle alone. The soldiers had left her at the door. She was not restrained. She carried no weapons. The council wanted to show that they did not fear her, that a single human was nothing compared to their power. She stood in the circle and looked up at the 12 beings who would decide the fate of her species. The Velthari sat on a throne of black stone. Their representative was even larger than High Arbiter Jalketh, with scars across his shell that spoke of ancient battles. The Rix Collective had sent a single body to represent their hive mind, but Elena could see others hidden in the shadows behind the throne, all connected, all thinking as one. The Malori were there, their bodies made of living crystal that chimed softly with each movement. The Vastori, who looked like giant snakes with too many eyes. The Thurian, small and gray, but known as the greatest scientists in the galaxy, and 8 others, each stranger than the last, each older than humanity, each looking down at her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to disgust to fear. High Arbiter Jalketh stood at a podium between Elena and the thrones. He held a device that projected images into the air above the chamber. His voice echoed off the ancient walls. "The accused will remain silent until called upon to speak," he said. "The evidence against the human species is as follows." He pressed a button. Images appeared in the air. Maps of space, showing the spread of human colonies over 3 centuries. Red dots multiplied like a disease, spreading across star systems that had been empty for millions of years. In the 300 years since first contact, Humanity has expanded into 17 star systems. This expansion was not approved by the Council. It violates the territorial compact of the Third Era. It threatens the buffer zones established to protect elder species from conflict. Elena said nothing. She watched the maps grow red. The Arbiter pressed another button. New images appeared. Medical scans. Battle footage. A human soldier continuing to fight after wounds that would have killed any other species in the galaxy. Human biology is dangerous, the Arbiter continued. Your species heals at rates that our scientists cannot explain. Your soldiers fight through pain that would disable any other creature. You bond with your wounded instead of leaving them behind, wasting resources to save individuals who cannot contribute. This makes you unpredictable, illogical, impossible to model. The Rix Collective spoke then, 1,000 voices blending into one. We have tried to understand your species. We have modeled your behavior for 200 years. Your decisions do not follow rational patterns. You take risks that offer no benefit. You sacrifice yourselves for strangers. You fight wars over ideas that have no physical form. You are broken. Elena remained silent. But inside, she felt something cold settle in her chest. They saw sacrifice as a flaw. They saw courage as a malfunction. They had watched humanity for 3 centuries and learned nothing about what made humans strong. The Arbiter pressed his button again. The image that appeared made the chamber fall silent. It was a planet, a human colony world called New Eden. The image showed massive structures being built beneath the surface, ships carrying materials that the Council had banned, scientists working on something that was hidden from even the most powerful sensors. Project Prometheus, the Arbiter said. His voice was harder now. Your species has been developing a weapon of mass extinction, a device so powerful that its mere existence violates 17 galactic conventions. Our spies have confirmed its location. Our scientists have estimated its capability. He turned to face Elena. His orange eyes burned with something that might have been hatred or might have been fear. This weapon could destroy stars. It could end all life in entire systems. And you have built it in secret, while smiling at our diplomats and signing our treaties. The chamber erupted in noise. The 12 species spoke over each other, their voices mixing into a storm of alien sounds. Elena caught fragments in languages she understood, words like threat and extinction, and destroy them now. The Arbiter raised his hand. Silence fell. The Council has reviewed all evidence, he said. We have reached our verdict. Humanity is guilty of all charges. Elena had known this was coming. But hearing the words still hit her like a blow. The sentence is as follows. The Arbiter's voice was cold and final. All human colony worlds will be placed under Council control. Human populations will be reduced to sustainable levels through controlled reproductive restrictions. All human technology above level 3 will be confiscated. Project Prometheus will be destroyed, along with everyone who has knowledge of its construction. He paused, looked down at her with those burning eyes. Humanity will be contained. You will never threaten the galaxy again. The chamber waited. The 12 species watched. They expected her to beg, to cry, to fall to her knees and plead for mercy like so many others had done in this chamber over the past 50,000 years. Elena did none of these things. She smiled. It was a small smile. Quiet. The kind of smile a person might give when they finally understood a joke that everyone else had missed. But in the silence of that ancient chamber, surrounded by beings who had ruled the stars for longer than her species had existed, that smile was the most terrifying thing any of them had ever seen. The Arbiter's eyes flickered. For the first time in 4,000 years, he felt uncertainty. You find your extinction amusing? He asked. Elena's smile grew wider. No, she said. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who was exactly where they wanted to be. I find it amusing that you think you have won. She reached slowly into her coat. 100 weapons appeared from hidden panels in the walls, all aimed at her heart. She ignored them. She pulled out a small chip and held it up so all 12 thrones could see. You have studied us for 3 centuries, she said. You have watched us from afar. You have modeled our behavior, and analyzed our biology, and spied on our colonies. And in all that time, you have learned nothing about what we really are. She took a step forward. The weapons tracked her movement. The 12 species leaned forward on their thrones. This chip contains the truth, Elena said. The real history of humanity. Not the version we showed you. Not the cleaned-up story we tell children. The truth about what our species is capable of when we stop pretending to be civilized. She looked up at the thrones. Her smile was gone now. In its place was something older, something darker. You have 1 day to review this information. After that, you will release me. You will withdraw your fleets. And you will pray that we accept your apology. The chamber exploded into chaos. But Elena stood in the center, calm as stone, and waited for them to realize that the trial had never been about humanity. It had been about them. The chaos in the chamber lasted for nearly an hour. Elena stood in her circle of bare metal and watched 12 species argue about what to do with her. Some wanted to execute her immediately. Others wanted to scan the data chip for traps before touching it. A few of the younger species suggested that perhaps they should listen to what she had to say. In the end, the High Arbiter restored order. He was 4,000 years old. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had prosecuted criminals who could destroy planets with a thought. He was not going to be frightened by a single human with a smile. "We will hear your statement," he said. His voice was hard. "But understand this. Nothing you say will change your sentence. This is merely a formality. Speak, and then you will be taken to your cell to await execution." Elena nodded. She had expected nothing less. "May I use the display?" she asked, pointing to the device that projected images into the air. The Arbiter hesitated. Then he stepped aside. "If you attempt to transmit anything, you will be killed instantly." Elena walked to the podium. She inserted her data chip into the device. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, every sensor, every organ of perception focused on the small human standing at the center of their power. She began with a question. "What do you know about Earth?" The question seemed to confuse them. The Thurian scientist spoke first. "Your homeworld, third planet from a small yellow star. You evolved there over several million years. You developed civilization approximately 10,000 years ago. Standard carbon-based development pattern." Elena nodded. "Standard. Yes. That is what we showed you." She pressed a button. An image of Earth appeared above her. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. Beautiful, isn't it? Peaceful. Calm. A quiet little world where a young species learned to walk upright and reach for the stars. She pressed another button. The image changed. Now, Earth was white, covered in ice, glaciers stretching across entire continents. This is what Earth looked like for most of our existence. Ice ages that lasted tens of thousands of years. Temperatures that would kill any species in this room. Our ancestors lived through this. Not in starships or heated domes. In caves, with fire and animal skins and tools made of stone. The image changed again. Showed small groups of humans hunting massive creatures with spears, fighting against cold and hunger and predators that wanted to eat them. We did not evolve in comfort. We evolved in hell. Every day was a fight to survive, and the thing that hunted us most was not the cold or the predators. She paused. It was ourselves. She pressed another button. The images that followed made several of the council members look away. War. Human war. Not the clean, precise conflicts that the council species engaged in. Not battles fought by robots and drones. This was something older. Rowware. Trenches filled with mud and blood and poison gas. Cities burning. Bodies stacked like firewood. "This is what we call the First World War," Elena said. "It killed 17 million people. It lasted 4 years. Both sides knew they were destroying themselves, and they kept fighting anyway. Do you understand? They watched their children die in mud and poison, and they refused to stop." The chamber was silent. The Rix Collective had stopped their whispering. The Velthari warrior was gripping his throne with all 4 hands. Elena showed them more. The Second World War. The Holocaust. Hiroshima. A mushroom cloud rising over a city, turning everything beneath it to ash and shadow. We developed the ability to destroy ourselves completely in less than a decade. Once we understood how atoms worked, it took us only 4 years to build a weapon that could end cities. And then we built more. Thousands more. Enough to burn every living thing on our planet 100 times over. She showed them the Cold War. 2 human nations pointing weapons at each other for 40 years, coming within minutes of ending everything. Not because they were evil, because they were afraid. "This is what we are," Elena said. A species that invented the concept of mutual destruction and then lived with it for decades. We slept every night knowing that at any moment, everything we loved could be turned to fire, and we adapted. We made it normal. She turned to face the thrones directly. You think Project Prometheus is a weapon? You think we built some device to threaten you? She laughed. It was not a happy sound. Project Prometheus is not a weapon. It is a leash. It is the system we built to keep ourselves from doing to you what we spent 100,000 years doing to ourselves. She pulled up new images, brain scans, psychological profiles, training programs. When we first made contact with the galaxy, we realized something. We were the most violent species in known space. Not because we wanted to be. Because evolution made us that way. Because surviving on Earth required us to be killers. Survivors. Creatures who would rather burn the world than admit defeat. The Arbiter stepped forward. You are saying that your species is inherently violent. This only confirms our decision to contain you. Elena shook her head. You still don't understand. We knew we were dangerous. So we did something about it. Project Prometheus is a set of psychological conditioning programs, training methods, social structures designed to suppress our natural instincts. Every human alive has been through some form of Prometheus conditioning. It is why we have been peaceful, why we have followed your rules, why we have smiled and nodded while you treated us like children. She stepped closer to the Arbiter. He was twice her height. He could have killed her with a single blow. But for the first time in 4,000 years, he stepped back. The leash is the only thing stopping us from being what we were made to be. And if you push us too far, if you threaten our worlds, our families, our children, we will take off the leash, and you will face the species that walked out of the ice ages, the species that built nuclear weapons and pointed them at itself, the species that has been practicing for this moment for 100,000 years. She let the words hang in the air. You have one day, she said, one day to review the full history of human violence, to understand what you are truly facing, and then you will make a choice. You will release me and withdraw your fleets, or you will fight a war against 100 billion people who have spent their entire evolution learning how to survive anything. She removed the data chip from the device and placed it on the podium. Run while you still can. The Arbiter stared at her. His orange eyes flickered with emotions that he had not felt in thousands of years. Fear, doubt, and something else. Something that might have been respect. He signaled the guards. They came forward to take her to a cell. But as she walked away, Elena saw something that told her she had won. The Thurian scientist was already reaching for the data chip. The Rix collective was whispering urgently among themselves. The Velthari warrior had not moved from his throne, his 4 hands still gripping the ancient stone. They would watch. They would learn. And when they truly understood what humanity was, they would do exactly what she had told them to do. They would run, or they would burn. The choice was theirs. The council reviewed the data for 6 hours. They gathered in a secure chamber deep within Athon Prime, far from the ears of servants and spies. The 12 species sat in silence as the full history of humanity played before them on screens that covered every wall. They watched the ice ages, saw the small groups of humans huddled in caves, fighting against cold that would have destroyed any other species. They saw humans eat their dead when food ran out. They saw mothers carry children through frozen wastelands for weeks, refusing to stop, refusing to give up, even when logic said there was no hope. The Thurian scientist took notes. His hands shook as he wrote. They watched the ancient wars, not the organized conflicts that the council species understood, but something primal and savage. Tribes of humans fighting over food, over land, over ideas. They saw cities burned to the ground. They saw massacres. They saw humans killing other humans with their bare hands, with rocks, with whatever they could find. The Mallory diplomat turned away. His crystal body chimed in distress, but the truly terrifying parts came later. They watched the First World War in detail. Not just the numbers, not just the maps showing lines moving back and forth. They watched the actual footage. Soldiers walking into walls of bullets, gas clouds drifting across trenches, melting lungs and skin, men drowning in mud, reaching up with their last strength toward friends who could not save them. And still, both sides kept fighting. For 4 years. Millions of dead, cities in ruins, an entire generation destroyed, and neither side would surrender. The Velthari military commander spoke for the first time in hours. This makes no sense. The losses were unsustainable. Any rational species would have negotiated peace within the first year. The Thurian scientist looked up from his notes. That is the point. They are not rational. At least, not by our definitions. They process loss differently. Each death does not weaken their resolve. It strengthens it. They watched the Second World War. The Holocaust. Factories designed to kill millions of people. Not for resources. Not for territory. For an idea. A belief that some humans were less than others. They saw the camps. The bodies. The cold efficiency of industrialized murder. The Rix Collective fell silent. All 1,000 voices stopped at once. They could not process it. A species that would murder its own kind on such a scale. For reasons that had nothing to do with survival. It broke every model they had ever built. And then they watched Hiroshima. The video showed a single bomb falling from a plane. A flash of light brighter than the sun. A mushroom cloud rising into the sky. And then, the aftermath. The shadows burned into walls where people had stood. The children with skin peeling from their bodies. The fires that burned for days. The council chamber was silent for a long time after that. They did this to themselves. The Mallory diplomat whispered. They invented a weapon that could destroy everything. And they used it on their own people. The Thurian scientist pulled up more data. They built more afterward, many more. Within 20 years, they had enough nuclear weapons to destroy their entire planet multiple times. 2 of their nations pointed these weapons at each other for 40 years. They called it mutually assured destruction. Both sides knew that if either attacked, everyone would die, and they lived with this. They raised children. They built cities. They went about their daily lives with extinction hanging over their heads like a sword. He paused. His voice was barely a whisper. They adapted to it. They made it normal. The Velthari commander stood up. He walked to the screens and stared at images of nuclear explosions. I have fought wars for 3,000 years, he said. I have commanded fleets. I have destroyed planets. But I have never seen anything like this. This is not a species that fights for survival. This is a species that fights because it cannot stop, because violence is woven into their very nature. He turned to face the other council members. I am withdrawing my forces from human space. Immediately. I will not fight these creatures. The High Arbiter spoke for the first time since the viewing began. You would disobey a direct order from the council? The commander laughed. It was not a happy sound. I am not afraid of the council. I am afraid of them. He pointed at the screens. You saw what they did to themselves. Imagine what they would do to us. But the most important file was still to come. The Thurian scientist found it buried in the data. A video message, recorded by Ambassador Vasquez before she left Earth. It was dated 3 months ago. They watched it together. Elena appeared on the screen. She was sitting in a simple room, wearing civilian clothes. She looked tired, older than she looked now. There were dark circles under her eyes. If you are watching this, she said, then the council has done something stupid. They have threatened humanity. They have pushed us to the point where we are considering removing the leash. She leaned forward. Project Prometheus is not a weapon. It is a system of psychological conditioning that suppresses the natural aggression of our species. Without it, humans revert to what we were on the ice plains, what we were in the trenches, what we were in the moments before we pushed the button on nuclear annihilation. She paused. Something flickered in her eyes. Something old and cold. We created Prometheus because we wanted to be better. We wanted to prove that we could be more than killers. We wanted to join the galactic community as equals, as friends, as partners in building something greater than ourselves. Her voice hardened. But we will not be contained. We will not be reduced. We will not watch our children be taken from us by species who think they have the right to decide how many of us get to exist. She stood up. The camera followed her. You have one chance. Release our ambassador, withdraw your fleets, apologize for your arrogance, and pray that we accept it. She looked directly into the camera, directly at them, because if you push us any further, we will take off the leash, and you will face the species that survived the ice ages, the species that walked through fire and poison and nuclear hellfire and kept going, the species that has never, in 100,000 years, learned how to surrender. The message ended. The council chamber remained silent for a very long time. Finally, The Rix Collective spoke. 1,000 voices, quieter than they had ever been. We cannot win, they said. Our models are clear. Even if we destroyed 90% of their population, the survivors would rebuild. They would adapt. They would come for us. And they would never stop. The High Arbiter looked at the empty screens, at the data that had changed everything he thought he knew about humanity. Then what do we do? He asked. The Velthari commander was already walking toward the door. We give them whatever they want, he said. And we pray they forgive us. Elena had been in her cell for 18 hours when the door opened. She had spent most of that time sleeping. There was nothing else to do. The cell was comfortable enough. The council did not believe in physical torture. They considered it primitive. She opened her eyes and saw High Arbiter Jalketh standing in the doorway. He was alone. No guards. No weapons. Just an ancient creature who looked like he had aged 1,000 years in a single night. May I come in? He asked. Elena sat up on the bed. It's your station. He entered the cell and stood near the wall, keeping distance between them. Elena noticed that his hands were trembling slightly. The most powerful legal mind in the galaxy, the being who had never lost a case in 4,000 years, was afraid of her. Good. The council has reached a decision, he said. His voice was rough, tired. All charges against humanity are dropped. Your territory is recognized in full. Our fleets are already withdrawing from your borders. A formal apology will be issued within the hour. Elena nodded. She had expected this, but she waited. There was more coming. She could see it in the way he stood, the way he avoided her eyes. I have a question, he said. One that has been bothering me since I watched your data. Ask. He finally looked at her. His orange eyes were dim, like fire burning low. Why did you warn us? Elena tilted her head. What do you mean? You could have let us attack. You could have stayed silent and let us invade your worlds. He stepped closer. You said it yourself. You would have fought. You would have survived. And eventually, you would have destroyed us completely. The data makes that clear. In a long war, humanity would win. It might take centuries. It might cost billions of lives on both sides. But you would win. He spread his 4 hands in a gesture of confusion. So why warn us? Why give us a chance to retreat? Why not just let us start a war we could not win? Elena was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the walls of her cell, at the floor, at her hands. Because we're tired, she finally said. The Arbiter waited. We spent 100,000 years killing each other, fighting over food, over land, over gods and ideas and colors on a map. We burned our own world. We came within minutes of ending everything we had ever built. She looked up at him. When we finally reached the stars, we hoped it would be different. We hoped we would find something out there that would force us to be better. She stood up and walked to the small window in her cell. The stars were visible, cold and distant. We wanted a common enemy, something that would unite us, something that would give us a reason to put away our weapons and work together. She touched the glass. When we met the council, we thought we had found that. We thought that if we could join you, if we could become part of something larger, we would finally have peace. Not because we were weak, but because we chose to be peaceful. She turned back to face the Arbiter. Project Prometheus was our gift to the galaxy, our promise that we would control ourselves, that we would be good neighbors, good partners, good friends. Her voice hardened. But if you make us choose between being the monster and being extinct, we will choose monster, every single time. Because that is what we are. That is what Earth made us. We did not evolve to surrender. We evolved to survive. And we are very, very good at it. The Arbiter was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I have prosecuted criminals for 4,000 years. I have seen species commit horrible acts for power, for resources, for survival. But I have never seen anything like humanity. You are the only species I have ever met that frightens itself. Elena nodded. That fear is what keeps us honest. We know what we are capable of. We have seen it. We carry the scars of it in our history, in our art, in our dreams. We do not pretend to be innocent. We know exactly what kind of monster lives inside us. She smiled slightly. And that knowledge is why we try so hard to be kind. Because we understand the cost of cruelty better than anyone. The Arbiter stood in silence for a moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He bowed. It was a deep bow. the kind that his species reserved for equals. "I apologize," he said. "On behalf of the Council. On behalf of my species. We were wrong about humanity." Elena accepted the bow with a nod. "We'll see if your council means it. Actions matter more than words." "They will." The Arbiter straightened. "A directive is being distributed to all council species. Humanity is to be treated with respect, with friendship, with generosity. Whatever you need, you will receive. Whatever disputes arise, you will be given the benefit of the doubt." He paused. "Some of us argued for this because we fear you, but others argued for it because of what we saw in your history. Not just the violence, the other things. The soldiers who died to save strangers, the people who shared food during famines, the doctors who worked through plagues to save lives that were not their own." He looked at her with something that might have been wonder. "Your species is capable of terrible things, but you are also capable of great kindness, perhaps greater than any species we have met. If you could channel that kindness, that determination, that refusal to give up, if you could use it for good instead of war, then maybe we could change the galaxy." Elena finished. "Yes." She walked past him toward the door. Then she stopped and looked back. "We've been trying to do that for 300 years, she said. "We just needed you to stop treating us like children, long enough to prove it." She left the cell and walked toward the docking bay where her ship waited. The corridors of Athon Prime were empty. Every alien she passed stepped aside and bowed their head. Word had spread. Humanity was not to be contained. Humanity was to be respected. And in the shadows, in the secret rooms of a dozen homeworlds, the leaders of the galaxy's oldest species had quiet conversations about what had just happened. They spoke in whispers about the data they had seen, about the ice ages and the trenches and the nuclear fire, about a species that had walked through hell for 100,000 years and come out the other side still standing, still fighting, still reaching for something better. On Earth, in a small office buried under a mountain, a general sat alone at his desk. Before him was a folder marked with a simple word: Prometheus. He opened it and looked at the protocols inside, the conditioning programs, the training methods, the careful systems that kept humanity's fire from burning out of control. He closed the folder and placed it in a drawer. Then he locked the drawer and prayed that he would never have to open it again. The galaxy had received its warning, and for the first time in 50,000 years, the rulers of known space looked up at the stars and wondered if they were truly alone, or if they had just been lucky enough to be ignored. Until now,